Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is the traditional unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh First Nations on whose territory we meet today. On behalf of Legal Aid BC and Law Foundation, I welcome you all in today's session. My name is Baljinder Gill, and I am the Community Training and Outreach Coordinator with Legal Services Society. Before I introduce the speakers to you, all the questions and answers, please, you can have them in the questions and answers box. We will try to interrupt the speakers in between, and if not, they will be answered in the end. And if there is overtime or the questions are not answered, I'm pretty sure speakers can follow up by email or we'll try to find some other ways to answer all your questions. I'm also thankful to Anna Gudu and Diane for providing us tech support today. Their support makes the sessions smooth and very, very helpful for us. On that note, it's my privilege today to introduce both the wonderful speakers, Isaac Vaughn and Kevin Love. Isaac is a lawyer in community law program with Community Legal Assistance Society. During law school, Isaac extremely volunteered with Law Students Legal Advice Program, providing legal representation and advice to low-income and vulnerable individuals. Please join me to welcome Isaac Vaughn. Along with Isaac, we have Kevin Love. I think many of you know Kevin. Kevin is a lawyer with Community Legal Assistance Society's law program, working primarily in the areas of mental health and workers' rights. Kevin has represented clients at all levels of courts, both provincially and federally, including Supreme Court of Canada. Kevin represents class on a number of committees, including WorkSafe BC's Policy and Practice Consultative Committee. Kevin chairs the Workers' Compensation Advocacy Group, which is an independent network of workers advocates throughout British Columbia. Kevin acts as a supervising lawyer for the First United Church Legal Advocacy Program in Vancouver Downtown East Side. So please join me to welcome Kevin to today's session.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that intro, and welcome everybody. So today we're going to go over what is an ever-changing topic and one that we can barely keep up on ourselves, but we're going to do our best. We're going to try to give you an overview of the EI changes that have recently come down, as well as what I've called collectively the new recovery benefits. So these are the new benefits that are going to replace CERB, the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, that a lot of your clients are going to be transitioning to. I'm going to apologize in advance because a lot of you are going to ask questions and you're probably going to get a lot of I don't knows or it depends or we're looking into that or we're trying to figure that out. This is all pretty new. We're trying to learn it as quick as we can and we'll do our best, but this is going to be sort of an evolving topic as it has been pretty much since March. So we'll try to be active on the POVNet lists. If anyone is not signed up, there is an employment insurance POVNet list where we'll discuss a lot of these issues, and we'll try to keep that up to date with any changes. But with that in mind, we will plow onwards. Oh, Isaac, you're driving. So just by way of a quick overview, what we're going to try to do is give a little bit of a wrap-up of CERB. This is the Canada Emergency Response Benefit that people have been getting between March and basically the end of September. So we're going to try to do a little bit of a wrap-up on that. Then we're going to talk about some of the changes to facilitate access to EI. and I really want to reiterate that a lot of you out there may not do a lot of EI, but with these changes, a lot more of your clients are going to be engaging with the EI system, and a lot of them could well be eligible when you wouldn't normally think of EI as a program that would apply to some of your clients. So it is going to be important to know. And then we're going to shift, and Isaac, once I'm done rambling about CERB and EI, Isaac is going to take you through some of the new recovery benefits, because again, I expect if you haven't already, you're going to start getting questions about these new benefits. They're built off of CERB, but they're definitely not the same as CERB. So there's some new things to know there. And I should add, there's a lot of people, but we will do our best. If you have questions on the fly, again, feel free to type them into the Q&A, and we'll try to get to them. And also, we should hopefully leave some time to have questions at the end. There's a lot of people, but we are going to try to do a couple of exercises. Isaac and I are still learning this whole Zoom thing. We're going to try along the way to do a few exercises where we'll have people using the chat to sort of give some ideas. So maybe save the Q&A for questions you want us to answer, and then what we'll be doing is trying to ask some questions, and in an effort to make this a little bit interactive, we're going to try to use the chat function for that. But okay, starting with CERB. CERB, this was the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. This was the program that the government put in place back in March. It's been extended a number of times. And CERB was, I think anyways, really a feature of two things. Number one, a realization that the EI system just didn't cover nearly enough people. We know about 40% of people who are unemployed are not actually, only about 40% of people who are unemployed are actually able to access EI. So EI just wasn't going to do the job in mass unemployment. And also, the EI systems were completely overwhelmed when back in March and April. So the government basically punted by bringing in this new benefit to get people through, and is now phasing that out and going to a new set of benefits. But I say CERB is only sort of done because people can still apply. There's still that last period, as many of you know, CERB was paid in 4-week blocks. That applications for that last period are still open, August 30 to September 26. It's really unclear what deadlines they're applying. We spent some time trying to figure it out. You can clearly apply online for that last period. If people have missed periods before August 30th, I'm not entirely sure why they wouldn't be able to claim them, but they're not letting you do it online, it doesn't look like. They're saying you have to contact CRA or Service Canada as the case may be. But in any event, the legislation says December 2nd to claim any CERB benefits you missed, but they seem to be making it up as they go along. So I would encourage you, if people still haven't claimed their last CERB payments, to get on that quickly. The other reason that CERB is not going to be done, because they're done. They may be getting close to being done paying benefits, but they are, in my sneaking suspicion, far from done from taking them back. So the government is starting to review claims. And we have started to try to figure out what that means and what people can do to deal with situations where they got benefits and the government has come back and said, oh no, sorry, you actually weren't eligible. So from what we hear, the most common reason people are going to be hit with CERB overpayments is that they didn't file taxes. Again, CERB was based on a declaration that you had earned at least $5,000 in the last 12 months or in the year 2019. The primary vehicle for checking in on that is your taxes. And the tax filing deadline, I think as a lot of people know, if you are like me as someone who does your taxes at the very last possible minute, was pushed back. So they've kind of been waiting for people to file their taxes, and now I think they're going through the process of checking earnings versus of earnings versus what you claim to get CERB. What is still somewhat unclear is what the system is and the mechanism is for challenging a CERB overpayment. We've started to see a few come in. Sonia, I don't know if you're on the line, but I know First United has seen at least one of these. It seems the letter that people are getting is indicating that there is an ability to write in and ask for a review. People are being informed of that. But exactly the rules and parameters around this are still very unclear. I had hoped to have some clarity from the government on this by this point, but rather than saying something wrong, what I'm going to say is there's directions in the letter with the overpayment, and probably the best you can do at this point is follow those directions and ask for a further review with any information or explanation you think you might need. But for a lot of people, a key thing is going to be, if you said you had income to get CERB, filing your taxes for 2019. So if I get more information on the CERB portion, we're a little more clear on the EI and the new benefits, what happens there. But for CERB, if we get some concrete information, we'll post that to the list and try to make that available for everyone, because I've asked a number of government people and have not gotten a very clear answer of exactly what the mechanism is, although apparently there is one. Okay, so that's CERB, the wrap up of the benefits that have sort of been floating us through the March to September period. So now what the government is doing is trying to essentially reopen EI and also create a new set of benefits to sort of pick up on CERB for people who are not eligible for EI. One of the features of CERB was that a lot of people actually could have gotten EI. There was a lot of people who were put out of work during the early days of the pandemic, and indeed still are, who could have gotten EI, but the government punted and said, okay, we'll talk to you in September. Here's your CERB. We'll talk to you into September when we get you back onto EI. Well, that has arrived now. And it's not just that they're getting people back onto EI who could have qualified for EI before. They've made changes to make a bunch of people eligible for EI who wouldn't otherwise have been eligible for EI. But there are still going to be situations that EI does not cover. And for these, they have created what we're loosely calling collectively the recovery benefits. And this is a collection of 3 new benefits, and we'll go through each of them, that are designed to help people who don't qualify for EI. So just to try to convince you that we want you to learn all about EI and get all excited about EI, and you will probably be seeing EI, these are the early numbers for just the first 2 weeks of this transition. We already have 250,000 people applying for regular EI, 100,000 people applying for the new caregiving benefit, which will explain about 60,000 applying for sickness. They expect we're going to get close to 900,000 workers collecting regular benefits in the next few months, and 700,000 people are projected to apply for the caregiving benefits. So there's a lot of people who are going to be needing help with these benefits. So we expect you will start seeing this and soon. So as I mentioned, EI was, this isn't exactly true, but easiest way to think about it, EI was kind of put on hold for about 4 months, but now it's back. And so what changes have they made? There's a number that are really quite helpful. So the first and most important is the eligibility for EI is down to 100 hours for everyone, everywhere, all benefits. Now, the exact mechanics of how they've done this is very complicated. A lot of you have heard the duck analogy, where the duck is ideally going smoothly across the water, but underneath it's frantic. That's kind of how this works. Basically, they've given people a credit of hours. Everybody gets a credit of hours. that essentially means they only need 120 more hours to qualify. But don't sweat the details. 120 hours is what you need to qualify everywhere, all benefits, special, regular, doesn't matter. They're also trying to deal with what was a really, really unfortunate situation, which was people who were particularly in the case of pregnancy was really quite tragic. People who, if they had kept working, would have had enough hours to establish a claim for pregnancy benefits and corresponding parental benefits, which, as people know, is a very big and critical claim for people. But because they were laid off, they could never get to the 600 hours. Well, they've now made these changes in effect retroactive. So if people didn't qualify for pregnancy or parental benefits or some of the caregiver benefits last spring and summer, they can now go back and qualify them retroactively, effectively. So I should probably pause for 1 second just in case people are less familiar with EI. We have what are called regular benefits. These are the benefits you get where, I lose my job for reasons beyond my control, I need temporary help. Then there's also what we call special benefits. And these special benefits are essentially benefits where you didn't necessarily lose your job, you just need time off work for a few specific reasons. So this includes pregnancy benefits, parental benefits, various caregiver benefits if you're caring for someone who is a family member who is sick. And it also includes sickness benefits. But for these special benefits that are listed, they can actually go back and qualify you retroactively. The other big change is that if you qualify for EI, you're going to get $500 per week. For those of you who have some experience with EI, you'll know that usually it's 55% of your average weekly earnings. If 55% of your average weekly earnings is higher than $500 per week, sure, you'll get a little bit more, but everybody is going to get at least $500 per week, and everybody is going to get at least 26 weeks of benefits. Okay, again, the details of how they actually brought these changes in are kind of complicated, but I think the takeaway is they brought in minimums to ensure people get a higher level of support for the next year going forward.
I just note, Kevin, we have a couple questions in the chat. Do we want to answer those now or leave them to the end?
Let's see here. How many hours needed for first-timer for maternity benefits? Right now, it's 120. It's 120 for everybody. There's no difference for, doesn't matter where you live, doesn't matter what benefit you're applying for, it's 120. Once these temporary benefits come off a year from now, it'll go back to 600, but now it's 120. What is the process for applying retroactive maternity and parental EI? I think you would just file an EI claim as usual. Okay, you just literally file an EI. You would just file an EI claim as normal. So there's no magic for retroactively applying for those benefits. I think you would just indicate when you went off work, when the baby was born, and the other information that you would normally give, and they should take care of the rest there. So here we'll do an example. So here's what we're gonna do. We've given an example, and if people just want to use the chat to sort of break down what kind of questions, if a client came in with this situation, what kind of questions would you be asking your client? So Aaliyah comes in saying she was pregnant last spring. She worked from February and March 2020. She was working, she did some work. She was laid off April 1st, but did not earn enough hours for CERB. She had her baby June 30th. She didn't apply for EI then because she was told she needed 600 hours to qualify for EI. So what information would you now be asking Aaliyah for to try to assess how you might be able to help her? So if you just want to type some ideas into the chat. Yeah, do you have 120 hours? Big one. Has she done her 2019 taxes yet? If you were gunning for the new recovery, or if she had gotten CERB, that is going to be definitely an important one. But EI, you should be able to get on without doing your taxes. So one of the nice things about EI is that they very rarely go to tax information. So it's still a good idea to do it in case she needs to access the recovery benefits later, but for EI, should be able to get around that. So those are all great. The only, did you get CERB during that period? Now, in Aaliyah's case, she's told you she didn't get CERB, but it's going to be a question you want to ask, because I'm actually not too sure how they're going to deal with that. If someone did get CERB but missed out on EI, and now they're going to retroactively give EI, you might get some deductions or set off going on. So those are all those are all great questions. The only other one I'd add, of course, is it might be worthwhile knowing if she's still off work, if she's planning to take the parental leave, a little bit about going forward. But do you want to skip ahead there, Isaac?
Sure. I'm just noting it looks like we might have a few more questions, not related to the example, but more general questions. Right.
What is the time frame for the 120 hours? These are all great questions, and I promise we have slides to tell you all about them. And in fact, I think it's a slide after the next one. When we're saying this year, do you mean up until December 20? No, literally it's a year from September 27th, 2020 till September 25th, 2021 is when these EI, most of these EI provisions are going to be in place. But I'm glad you asked that question, because for this one, the retroactive applications for parental pregnancy benefits, caregiver benefits, it's going to be a lot easier to take advantage of that if you apply before October 25th. Yeah, that's also a good question. Partner applied for similar benefits. Basically, until October 25th, they're basically going to backdate your claim and assume you're not late applying. After October 25th, you may need to provide some explanation. So if you know people who are in this situation, try to get that application filed as soon as possible. Okay, so those are all good questions. So so let's say you get the information back from Aaliyah. She thinks she worked at least 120 hours in March and April. She's still on leave caring for her child. We've kind of given it away at this point, but what would you tell Aaliyah to do now? This one's a lob ball. All you have to do is type apply for EI. So even though she wasn't entitled before, she could be entitled now. So the key is going to be to apply for EI. So, okay, so talking about the period to collect your hours, normally in EI, the general rule is it's 52 weeks. So you have to have worked the hours you need in the last 52 weeks. But we have this complication because of CERB and this wee pandemic that we're dealing with. So what they have done is said that if you didn't get CERB, it's still going to be 52 weeks. But if you did get CERB, your benefit period is going to be, or your qualifying period is going to be extended by 28 weeks. So essentially, you can look back 80 weeks. So it's a really big window for people to have worked those 120 hours. And this is why, again, a lot of people who you might not think would be eligible for EI might well be eligible for EI. You know, people who are getting disability assistance and doing some work, you know, very minimal work to supplement those benefits. Yeah, they could easily have 120 hours worked in that period. So we do have to watch out for that. Fishers, I always get dreaded. Anna's probably going to be on the line and ask me all kinds of questions about fishing benefits, and I'm going to say I don't know. But they are looking at different ways to facilitate access to fishing benefits as well. And my understanding is what they're going to do is look back at look at earnings as far back as 2018. So you can essentially use the same earnings to that you used to qualify before to qualify again, and again at a reduced entry. The entrance requirements for fishers are also going to be reduced, corresponding to what workers who qualify by hours get. Other changes, there's no medical certificate or waiting period for sickness claims. So normally for EI sickness, you have to go to your doctor, they have to fill out a certificate, you got to submit that. That's been waived. And also for people who know about EI, normally after you apply, you have to wait a week before you can start qualifying, before you can start actually getting your benefits. They've waived that, so you can just apply and start getting that week. Now, there's still a lag time, perhaps, in processing your application, but you'll get retroactively paid benefits back to the week you apply. For all other EI benefits, they're waiving the waiting period until October 25th. So again, people can apply. And when we talk about this, is going to be particularly important for people who are rolling from CERB to EI. It should ideally, and we're already seeing news reports that the ideal is not actually happening, but it's supposed to be a fairly seamless transition into EI. And sorry, just responding to Christy's questions here. When you're referring to disability benefits, are you speaking of provincial or federal? I was speaking of provincial disability that allows, where there is an earning exemption that people can take advantage of. And, a lot of those folks will be, might have worked enough to establish an EI claim, and we'll come to a little bit on the interaction. We'll come into a little bit of the interaction between the provincial benefits and EI at the end of the presentation. But for federal disability benefits, again, if someone's on CPP disability, for example, again, they may, as always, still, it's possible they have an EI claim, but that raises a lot of complicated issues we won't go into about, that's sort of that danger zone between doing enough work to qualify for EI, but not so much that you put your CPPD benefits in jeopardy. So, but theoretically, both people could be working enough to qualify for EI. Okay, CERB to EI transition. So this is probably going to be a fair amount of the questions you'll start getting immediately. I was on CERB. I'm really nervous, and a lot of people were right to be nervous because the government was right down to the throne speech before they actually had a transition, plan. So a lot of people might be very confused, but basically the idea is that certain people are going to be transitioned directly from CERB onto EI. So how do you know if someone's going to be transitioned exactly from CERB to EI? For those of you who know a little bit more about CERB, what we call CERB is actually really two different benefits. There was the true Canada Emergency Response benefit that people who were self-employed and not really covered by the EI system were getting, and they applied through the Canada Revenue Agency. There was also the EI Emergency Response benefit that was given to people who could have had EI claims, but they just couldn't deal with it then, so they punted those EI claims down the road. And those people applied through Service Canada. And when people went to apply for CERB, they should have been answered a few questions about their work and been streamed to one or the other based on the work they did before applying. If people were streamed to Service Canada and were getting CERB through Service Canada, they are supposed to be automatically transferred to EI without the need for another application. What is ideally supposed to have happened is that sometime in the last 5 or 6 months, the employer is supposed to have filed the ROE like all employers are supposed to, and using that, they have spent the last several months assessing whether people are entitled to EI, and if they are, automatically transitioning them. So there's a question about, do you have a record of employment? And that's a really good one, because I can see this being a real problem, especially with a lot of smaller employers going out of business. Tracking them down for an ROE is going to be a nightmare in a lot of cases. But Do keep in mind that just because your client didn't get an ROE doesn't mean there wasn't one filed. If an ROE is filed electronically by the employer, it goes directly to Service Canada, and it doesn't go to the employee. You only have to give an employee a record of employment in hard copy if you're doing it in hard copy. So if someone doesn't have an ROE, I still go and apply for EI. It's very important to get the EI claim filed. There's a good chance the ROE is there electronically, in which case there's no problem. If they come back and say it's not, well, then you're into trying to write to the employer to try to get the ROE, or alternatively, trying to help the client prove their earnings outside the record of employment. But the first task will be trying to get that record of employment. People who got CERB through the CRA. So these are primarily people who are self-employed. They work for themselves. They are going to have to apply for EI if they think they are EI eligible. And there could be a lot of these people, because a lot of people, when they applied for CERB, might say, well, I did a brief amount of work, but I did a brief amount of work as an employee, but mostly I'm self-employed, so I wouldn't normally qualify for EI. But now that the hours have dropped all the way to 120, there could be a lot of people who didn't think they would be eligible for EI before, but now could be. So, or again, people who did barely enough work to get over the $5,000 threshold. Maybe they only worked 300 hours or so to get there, didn't think they would be eligible for EI, but now that the hours are down to 120, they might be EI eligible. And so those people will not be automatically rolled over to EI. They have to apply. So this could be very difficult to sort out what group people are in, but people should have gotten a letter. We are told that people should have gotten a letter. So the first question I think to ask is, do you know whether you got your CERB through CRA or through Service Canada, and did you get a letter? Because hopefully that'll help clarify it. But if the person is not getting EI, I think my advice would be just apply, because it's better to apply and say you didn't have to than to have the person sit and wonder if they're going to be automatically rolled over. Sorry, I'm just looking at the question box here. Yeah, I think if you're unsure, apply. You might be able to, again, if you can get access to your client's CRA My account or their Service Canada account, and you can go in with them if they're comfortable giving you that access, you can probably find a lot of information there, and that would be a place I would start. But you can also ask for clues, like when you applied for CERB, it asked you, had you worked full-time for this amount of months or part-time for this amount of months? What did you answer? And that might be able to provide you a clue. But if you're unsure, I would say get the EI application in. For people who did not lose work, have continued to work, does the old EI benefit still apply for sickness? Can that still be accessed, or is it gone? I think the long and short, Joyce, is if people have not lost work, they're not going to be able to get either of these benefits, the EI or the recovery benefit. EI sickness is still absolutely there, but it has some limitations because EI is still based on, for those who have done some EI, the interruption of earnings, which usually means a week, no work, no pay. So hold that thought. Isaac's going to talk about the new Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit, and it plugs a bit of a gap because it doesn't require you to miss an entire week of work to have that interruption of earnings. So I think in a nutshell, yes, EI sickness is very much still there, but it's limited. And so the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit is plugging a bit of a gap. And I'll note that gap is being plugged both for people who might otherwise be eligible for EI and also for people who aren't. So if somebody was already claiming EI and receiving less than $500 a week, will their EI be topped up? I might need a little more information on this. Was it someone claiming EI before March 15th, like when the pandemic started, or is it somebody who qualified in August?
I've got the answer here, Kevin. So they began claiming sickness EI before March 15th.
Right. So if people have an EI claim, this gets complicated. If someone has an existing claim from before March 15th and they haven't used up all their weeks, I think they're giving them the option to restart that claim now, or if it's more advantageous to file a new one, to cancel the old claim and file a new one. And that is an incredibly complicated decision. So all I can say is maybe reach out if you have a client in that situation, and we can go through the specifics, because there's not always a right and a wrong answer for what to do there. But the long and short, I think, is that the old EI claim still exists and it can be reactivated, but it may be more advantageous to file a new one if they have the hours to file a new one. If they don't have the hours to file a new one, then they're going to have to rely on the old one. And I'm not sure if it's going to be topped up. I do not believe it is. I believe if you're restarting a claim that began before September 27th, you're not getting topped up. But I'll double check that. But I'm pretty sure that's right.
There is one more, I believe. They ask if someone has used all their sickness hours, can they apply for regular benefits if they still don't have a job to go back to?
When you say they've used all their sickness hours, do you mean paid sick leave, or do you mean they established a claim for EI sickness but have used all their benefits? If the question is they've used all their paid EI sick time but are still out of work, yes. So EI sickness claim, if they've used up all their EI sickness weeks, you can convert a claim to regular benefits, but of course you'll have to prove that you're, as usual, that you're ready and available and looking for work. So if you've used up all your sickness weeks, but are still sick and can't do a job search, can't be ready for a week, then no, you can't flip to regular. But if you have recovered and can go back to work, then you can flip to regular. And sorry, Arnie, I'm just seeing your question. With all the changes, does Service Canada provide any group with up-to-date information? Has told me there's so much info in internal memos that we should be asking Service Canada reps if they have internal memos on the issue we're checking on. It's a real issue, and we're struggling to keep up on it ourselves. Things are changing day to day. They've been reasonably good with putting FAQs up on their website and keeping info up on their website, but even that's not perfect. So I don't really have any good answers for you. I'm sure that, again, behind the scenes, everyone is tearing their hair out and there's paper flying everywhere. And I think it is going to be a case a lot like the early days of CERB, where you ask 3 people and you get 3 different answers, but the best we can do is muddle through.
It looks like we've actually got one more hidden question in the chat. Doesn't EI require people to look for full-time work like CPPD?
I don't think CPPD has a job search requirement. I think CPPD is premised on the idea you can't pursue substantially gainful employment regularly. But EI does definitely have a work search component, absolutely. And you will be, your client will be expected to meet that. We've been told that of course is going to be, a reasonable job search is going to be viewed through the lens of the current pandemic, but both EI and the recovery benefits, the Canada Recovery Benefit that Isaac's going to talk about, both have job search requirements. And yes, within what's reasonable in the current pandemic, you are going to have to be looking for work and be willing to accept opportunities to go back to work.
Sorry, I think I might have slightly misread your question there. She wrote RECPPD, not like CPPD. So.
Doesn't EI require people to look for full-time work? Yeah, it does. So I think if you're collecting CPPD on the basis that you've been found to be incapable of regularly pursuing substantially gainful employment, but on the flip side, you're out looking for full-time work, is there a risk to your CPPD benefits? And I will defer to the CPPD experts on that. I think there is a risk, but certainly for CPPD, it is not a requirement that you can't do any work at all. You can do some work and still get your CPPD. So it raises an interesting issue that now that the hours has come down so low, a lot of the people who are doing very minimal work for CPPD, are they suddenly going to be eligible for EI? But yeah, I think there is some risk there that people are going to want to be live to. And in terms of that interaction, I'll probably defer to the good folks at Disability Alliance BC or other people who do a lot of CPPD work to sort of assess how big that risk is. Okay, so client laid off December 2019 due to seasonal shortage of hours, was not recalled at end of March due to COVID, but directed to stay on EI until exhausted, then apply for CERB. Does not qualify for new CRB and has run EI claim out, still unemployed, any recourse? Good question. I'm tempted to say no, but before I give a hard no, I probably want to think about it more. If the EI claim started before March, if the EI claim started before March 15th and has been exhausted, and they haven't worked 120 hours since that time, I'm not sure they'd be able to establish a new EI claim now. I haven't heard anything that has gotten rid of the general rule that you can only count an EI hour for one claim. So I believe that even though you can look back 80 weeks, if you've already used hours in those 80 weeks to establish an EI claim, I don't think you can use those hours to establish a new claim now. But before I give that's a great question. And before I give a hard answer on that while being recorded and then have everyone tell me I'm wrong, let me take that away. Okay, so again, we'll use the chat here. Just to give people a chance to sort of think and do a little bit of interactive if you're still listening to us and aren't multitasking. So Maria, let's say Maria was getting CERB. She is worried that CERB is ending and wants to know what to do. So this could be a very real situation where clients are just kind of freaked out, rightfully, that CERB is over and they don't really know what to do. What kinds of questions would you be asking to try to sort out how you're going to direct someone like Maria? So if you have ideas, maybe just fire them into the chat. Yeah, exactly. How many hours? Yeah, try to figure out where if they got CERB. Yep, exactly. These are all great. Yep. And yeah, the ROE again, it's good to ask, but do keep in mind that the ROE is submitted electronically, will go automatically to Service Canada for EI. So your client may have an ROE without knowing it. Yeah. If you're unsure, might as well apply anyways. Yeah. That's all great stuff. The one other, yeah, you're gonna need Service Canada account because that's gonna help apply. How many hours you've worked. Yeah. What you might want some information. That's good. We'll be coming to that in a second, but that's also good. What was happening with work and why you stopped? Because again, the usual rules around quitting for EI, they're still there. Getting fired for misconduct, I believe that's all still there. So yeah, good question. Are you able to work right now? That's a good one, because if you're going to be getting on EI, you're going to have to be proven this job search again in the context of COVID. What is reasonable? So, yeah, that's all great stuff. You want to flip ahead there? So let's suppose Maria says she was getting CERB from CRA, so she was getting it from Canada Revenue Agency, not from Service Canada, not from the EI people, but from CRA. But she says she thinks she worked full time in February and March. So full-time, let's assume she's basically saying she's done 8 weeks of full-time employment. What would you tell Maria? Yes, right. Yep. She's going to have to apply for EI. She's likely eligible for EI. She's been working full-time, good bet. She's got the hours, but she's not going to be one of these lucky people who was rolled automatically. If she had gotten her benefits through Service Canada, there's a good chance that they would roll her automatically onto EI. But because she was getting it through CRA, she's probably going to need to actually file an EI application new, and that's something you could maybe help her with. So that's great stuff. And with that, Isaac, I'll try to play moderator, and over to you.
Oh, sorry, Kevin. Looks like there's one last question in the chat.
If she applied through Service Canada, should she contact them to ensure she's being rolled over to EI? Look, I am someone who always likes to confirm, and I am torn between two evils. One is I don't trust anybody I want to confirm, but the second evil is I can only imagine how painful it is to call Service Canada right now and try to get anything. So I think I would start by trying to go into her Service Canada account, CRA account, trying to see what you can find. And I think I might also wait for when the first payment should. Yeah, there it is. It's on hold for 2 hours and 20 minutes yesterday. Yeah, sounds about right. So, you might, about now, people should be seeing their checks. If people haven't seen checks in the next week or so, maybe that's a red flag. There's a problem, but I might give a little bit of time for the benefits to roll in. My understanding is it should happen pretty quick if people are rolled over. If you have to file a new application, it could create delay. So that's one disadvantage of filing an application. But I think you might, if you want to confirm, I'm with you. I always like confirming, but look at these numbers. If people are watching the chat, these are the numbers that people are experiencing. So if you can find another way to answer the question, you might like your life a whole lot better.
It looks like we've got one more from Allison as well.
If someone applies for EI and the record of employment has not been filed digitally and they don't have a copy, can you talk about clients' other options with Service Canada and trying to get ROEs or other ways to show insurable employment? We're going to touch on that, Allison, right at the end, but I'll give you a preview. Service Canada, like most government agencies, doesn't like doing work. So, that's really not fair. Service Canada has been working and the government has been working their tail off to try to get these benefits rolled over, and a lot of people are doing a lot of work. But they're not going to want to chase an ROE for you if you haven't made efforts. So, the first step is going to be probably to call the employer. You might want to send some written letters. You send some notices to the employer, letters asking for the record of employment. Do a couple of those, but critically get the EI claim filed. The most important thing is to get the EI claim filed, even without an ROE. And our understanding is that if you absolutely cannot get an ROE, you're going to get contacted, and they're going to ask you to try to prove your earnings some other way, by pay stubs, and other mechanisms like that. But it's certainly something that advocates can help people do. Is you can't just sit back and say I didn't get a record of employment. You've got to proactively try to get it. It's unfortunate, but such is life.
Okay. And we're just getting a few helpful points on that last issue. So Cassidy says that they've had luck with booking phone appointments with Service Canada representatives if the matter can wait 1 to 2 days, and that they include a link that I think everybody should be able to access. And Heather also says that you can make an online service request to have Service Canada call you, which I think is the same thing.
And sorry, can I just point here? Have you heard that the employer sent the ROE to Service Canada before the clients apply for EI? An employer has an obligation to file an ROE right away. I think it's within it's 5 days. It's a short amount of time in most circumstances. Sometimes it can be a little longer depending on the pay periods. But overall, the employer is supposed to be doing that right away. It's not the obligation to file an ROE isn't triggered by your client's EI application. The obligation to file the ROE happens long before your client applies for EI. So yeah, if the employer is doing what they should do, and I know we're all kind of rolling our eyes a bit. If the employer has done what they should do, it should be there already, well before the client has applied.
Okay, so seeing no further comments in the chat box, we'll move on now to the new recovery benefits that we've been talking about. So these benefits replace the CERB benefits that we've seen for the past few months. Obviously, the last period or so of CERB is still available for application, but these benefits are active from September 27th of this year until September 25th of next year. The idea with these benefits is that they target workers who aren't EI eligible. So it's important to kind of recognize that these benefits run alongside EI. EI is going to be available for some people, and these benefits are hopefully going to be available for most people that aren't able to meet the EI requirements. So there's 3 different kinds of benefits with 3 different eligibility criteria. One is the Standard Canada Recovery Benefit, the CRB. There's also the Recovery Sickness Benefit and the Recovery Caregiving Benefits, which we'll look at all 3 of them because they are a little bit different from each other. So I think we start with just the general information. All of the benefits pay $500 per week. Unlike CERB, tax is deducted from each payment. So I think you'll see, I think I saw that your clients will be getting checks for something closer to $450. You can apply right now either through CRA in my account or by phone. I would caution that if you attempt to apply by phone, you'll get a recorded message. You sort of go through a telephone tree where you press 1 or 2 depending on what the answer to the question that you're being asked is. The phone message does suggest that the phone service is not going to be available for the entirety of the period that the CRB benefits are going to be offered. So it's not clear as of yet when the phone service option is going to go away, but you are likely best served to advise your clients that they shouldn't necessarily expect to be able to continue to apply by phone, which is important because, as you see, you have to reapply for each benefit period. You do a declaration that you meet the criteria for the benefit, but there can be, and there's potentially more front end screening than there is with CERB. You also apply on the Monday after the period that you're claiming for ends. So if you are, unable to work because of COVID, for example, because you are potentially positive and so we're isolating at home rather than going to work. Let's say, for example, the first week of October, you then apply at the end, after that week has completed, to be sort of retroactively paid the benefits for that week, if that makes sense. So there are a few general requirements for these benefits. You have to be a resident and present in Canada. You have to have a valid social insurance number. You need to be at least 15 years old, and you need to have earned at least $5,000 in 2019, in 2020, or in the last 12 months. And I'm just seeing a question here. Has any indication been given of issues with CRA accounts being fixed? I find CRA accounts impossible to set up for my clients due to error messages or the info not matching what CRA has on file. I do know that there were some errors reported on the first day that the general benefit launched, which was Monday. So I don't know if those are the error messages that you're seeing. CRA online is not the easiest thing to get set up because CRA, at least when I applied for my personal one about a year or so ago, you'll sign up online, but then they also have to mail you a confirmation code, which you then enter. So I'm not sure if that's the issues that you're having. It's been difficult for a long time. Yeah, I bet. So I haven't heard anything about CRA accounts in general being fixed. Kevin, do you have anything that you've heard about this?
Nope. I haven't heard anything. I know CRA has these accounts have frustrated us all for some time, and I just don't. I just don't know.
It's unfortunate that these benefits, as I think you're going to see, these benefits do rely fairly substantially on a CRA online account. The application process, as we'll see, primarily runs through the CRA online sort of web portal, notwithstanding the phone option, which we have for now. But yeah, certainly I think this is, I'd expect that this is still a live issue for a lot of people.
And Isaac, can I just say just one thing on a bit of a different topic? I think it was Gercharan who asked in the last one just about this issue of people who might be trapped outside outside the country and not being able to get back. They have a, they normally make the residence in Canada. There is, I noticed, a bit of a different language. In CERB, the legislation just said resident in Canada. And, you can be resident in Canada. If we go on vacation, for example, to another country, we're still resident in Canada, even though we're taking a temporary leave outside the country. They've added the word "and present" in the new benefit legislation, and I'm nervous where that's going. Whether that's a straight shot across the bow of people who are trying to claim if they are trapped elsewhere, but I don't know yet. But just to make note that it does say resident and present in Canada now in the legislation.
Yeah, and I guess maybe just to briefly add to that is, I'm sure many of us know, these benefits can be administered by direct deposit, so it's not like they need a mailing address in the country or anything like that to have somebody go and pick the checks up. So I'm not sure. Kevin, I'm not sure where they're driving at either. Yeah. So these are the details on the basic Canada Recovery benefit. So to be eligible, you have to be earning at least 50% less than your previous average weekly earnings. You must be looking for work. You must not have unreasonably quit your job or placed undue restrictions on going back to work. And you also must not have refused a reasonable chance to start working again. And I think anybody who's worked in the legal system long enough, when they see the word reasonable, they start to get a little bit squeamish about, well, what does that mean, and how are you going to prove that? And I think those are important issues to be live to. And so, as a practical matter, these are just things that may be helpful for. It might be good practice to advise clients to sort of try and paper these types of things as much as they can, try and explain what their reasons for quitting might be, or keep a log of attempts that they made to get back to work and things like that. But that's sort of the basics. Those are the basic declarations that you would need to make to be eligible for the benefit.
And Isaac, sorry, I just add one thing. For those who have done a lot of EI work in the past, particularly the language around quitting, it doesn't exactly line up with what the test we're familiar with in EI. EI, the test is no reasonable alternative to quitting your job. Here it says unreasonably quit your job. So they are kind of same, but different. But I think the Canada Recovery benefit is hopefully going to have not be quite as strict as the EI test, but we shall see.
Yeah. And it having been available for about 48 hours, no, a little bit longer than 48 hours now, we're still going to have to wait and see how these things kind of shake out. But the difference in the wording is for sure, it's interesting. So this is it's a 26-week benefit. You can't get this benefit while you're getting EI at the same time. It's paid in 2-week blocks, and you have to reapply after each block. And again, the application comes at the end of your block of eligibility. So if you're unable to work for 2 weeks, you have to wait for those full 2 weeks to elapse, and then the application goes in at the end of the period. So we'll look at an example here. We have Emilio. He works as a house cleaner. He stopped working on March 18th this year when COVID hit. He thinks he's declared $26,000 on his 2019 tax return. He was getting CERB, but he's worried that it's ending. So what sort of questions would you ask Emilio in order to be able to advise him of what his options might be? Why did he stop working? That's a good question to ask. Because if he quit his job, if he earned over $38,000 in 2019, was he self-employed or working for a company? That's an important piece here. If he's currently looking for work, yeah. Okay. So just to add a few more details then, Emilio says he works independently. He does not work for someone else. He said he's trying to work as much as possible, but is only earning about $200. And what would you advise him? Yeah, so apply for CRB as his earnings have been reduced by 50%. The other obviously big point is that he works independently. He doesn't work for an employer, so he is not eligible for EI on that basis. So, yeah, the best course of action, I think, based on the facts that we have, is that CRB may be available to him.
And that distinction about working for yourself versus someone else is still important. Someone can have worked more than 120 hours, but if they did it as an independent business or contractor, they still may have worked 120 hours but not be covered by EI. So the 120 hours still has to be an employment that's covered by the EI system. But then again, the key piece again, he's lost 50% of his earnings. $26,000 before works out to about $500 a week. 200 is less. And the only other thing, just to note, there could be people who could qualify both ways. You might have work is increasingly less clear. You might have people who have done some work as an employee and some work as a self-employed person, and maybe they have enough to qualify for both. Isaac, I don't know if this is consistent with what you've read, but I think what they're saying is it's EI first, that if you're eligible for EI for a week, you're not eligible for the recovery benefit. You're only eligible for the recovery benefit if you are not EI eligible. But because both benefits have been set at $500 and only EI can go higher, it's hard to see anybody being worse off on EI.
Yeah, I think in fact you have to make a declaration that you're not eligible for EI in order to get these benefits. And DD adds to keep track of all the efforts to get or keep work, which is also a smart thing to do. So moving on, so that was the first of the 3 new benefits. This is the second, which is the Canada Recovery Sickness Benefit. So this is basically a benefit that's available to people who have or may have contracted COVID-19 and are isolating or have an underlying condition that put the person at a greater risk. So the requirement is that you cannot work at least 50% of your usual work week. This is available for a maximum of 2 weeks. It's not a general sickness benefit. It must be COVID related. It can't be received if the worker is getting paid sick leave, sick benefits, or WCB payments. it's paid in 1 week blocks, and again, you have to reapply each block. I guess, Kevin, just to clarify on the WCB, that's if the person is actively off of work on a compensation claim, right? Like that wouldn't include a permanent loss of function.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I'll double check. I mean, I think the idea here is to prevent double dipping. Mm-hmm. So I would assume so. I think primarily what they're targeting is, a lot of people who are contracting COVID are the workers who have been working through this thing for all our benefit. And a lot of that could be covered by the WCB system. And I don't think they want people getting both. And it raises kind of a related point. There was a question before about the interaction with EI sick benefits. So it's important to realize that when we say you're not eligible for EI, that would include situations where people don't actually have an interruption of earnings, being that week with no work and no pay, to get an EI claim. So even if someone is theoretically covered by the EI system, they have the 120 hours when they get sick or when they need to go off work, they can apply for this benefit. They can still apply for this benefit. So the Canada Recovery benefit is really an either or, but this one, a lot of people who might be generally covered by the EI system can apply for this one because they couldn't get EI sickness because they don't have an interruption of earnings. I hope that's not too unclear, because this one only requires you losing 50% of a usual work week, which may not be enough to qualify for EI sickness. So it's still a little gray to me, the interaction between when they're going to give people covered by the EI system this one versus EI sickness. But I think the only takeaway is if a worker is sick and finds themselves in a position where they can't actually qualify for an EI sickness claim, they can still get this. I hope that wasn't too confusing. It probably was, but and actually, I just said something wrong. I should actually go back. EI sickness is available because it's a special benefit with a reduction in hours. I should probably stop talking and actually think about what I'm saying before I'm speaking. But so that the interruption of earnings rules are different. But again, the takeaway is you can still get this Canada Recovery sickness benefit if you're covered by the EI system but can't get EI sickness.
Right.
I'll be quiet now.
No, don't do that. We have a question. How long until they can reapply for this benefit? I suppose I would think the question is if the person has two separate incidents where they are in a position where they have to isolate because of suspected COVID. Suspected COVID incidents. My understanding was that this was only available for 2 weeks total, but Kevin, perhaps I'm wrong about that.
No, it's 2 weeks total, but I think you could take them in 2 1-week blocks. Yeah, I think it's 2 weeks total, but I suppose if you had to isolate once, go back to work and isolate again, you could get the 2 weeks separated, I think.
And we have a question in the chat as well. What kind of documentation would you need to submit to ensure a person actually had COVID or is isolating? Do you need a doctor's note? Kevin, I don't think I saw anything about including a doctor's note with the application. I suppose this might be an issue more for if your client is ever audited, it might be worth them having something at the time, but I don't know. I don't know how likely it is that these are going to be audited, given that they're pretty short periods of time.
Yeah, they absolutely do not want people going for doctor's notes. If you're sick or isolating, it's just a declaration. What you have to declare is that the staying home, isolating, whatever it is on the advice of, sure, it could be a doctor or a nurse, but it could also be public health officials, the government, other people in authority, your employer. So let's put it this way, if you say, like if you have a cough and a fever, and you decide to stay home, you're not going to need a doctor's note to back that up. Now, it is a good point, Isaac, and we're still not sure about this. They can go back and ask for information later to verify claims, but I think it would be totally unreasonable to demand a doctor's note or something like that. So, if they found out that you were actually staying home because you sprained your ankle playing tennis, that could be a problem. That might be the kind of thing they're going to audit, but I would be very surprised if they went back and audited people making decisions that are consistent with public health advice to stay home. The overarching goal of this is to get people to make the smart decision to stay home without and mitigate some of the financial consequences of that. And by waiving the medical certificate for EI, it's a pretty concrete policy choice that they don't want everyone rushing to their doctors to get a doctor's note. So that's a long-winded way of saying, yes, they can ask for more information, but I would be very shocked if they demanded something like a doctor's note to say you had a fever over 102.
I don't know if they still have this, but they used to. There was at one point a tool from the province online where it was a questionnaire you could fill out, basically, answering questions about a series of symptoms. And I think if any of them, there was cough, fever, runny nose, whatever, and if you had any of them, the suggestion was isolate for 2 weeks. So that might be an example of something your client could go through just to say they had public health advice to isolate.
Yep. There's another question that I think actually dovetails off this, which is if a person takes medication that makes them immunocompromised and therefore at a high risk of COVID infection, can they apply to this if they meet the rest of the criteria? And again, the answer is yes, but you have to show that your decision, and this is where it gets a little more difficult with doctor's notes, you have to show that your decision is consistent with advice from a doctor, registered nurse, public health officials, government. So, if there, I don't know if for a particular condition, there's general advice out there saying you should stay off work, that might suffice. But for those claims, I think a call to the doctor would make sense to get that opinion. And if they were going to crack down on any of the claims, it would probably be these. So I think it's a good question. And these ones I might treat a little more cautiously if you're making a decision to stay home, not because you've been exposed or because you're having symptoms, but just because you have an underlying medical condition that makes you more at risk. Yes, you absolutely can access these benefits, but those types of claims I would be a little more careful documenting with a doctor.
And the 2-week limitation would still apply.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So we've got another example. Just before we get into this, is it 2 weeks total or at a time? It's the answer to that was it's 2 weeks total, but you don't necessarily have to take the 2 weeks consecutively. So they can be split up into 2 1-week blocks, although I think the provincial health advice is generally to isolate for at least 14 days. I don't think there's any advice out there that suggests only a week isolation is going to be sufficient. So there may not be much utility in having somebody isolate only for 1 week. So we'll look at another example here. So we have until they get a negative test. That might be a good point. I'm not a doctor, so I don't know. I got to be careful not to be giving advice about when people should or shouldn't be isolating. But yeah, certainly, it's the option seems to be there to split it into 2 1-week periods if you want. So we have Sally.
I need to go back a slide. I think you're
Oh,
ahead.
did I go too far?
So
I did go too far. Thanks, Kevin.
you've given them the answers now. This is easy for all of you who never want to write anything in the chat. You just got some answers.
Yeah, so we better get lots of responses on this one.
Totally.
So Sally has a cough and a fever. She decides to take a COVID-19 screening test, and she misses some work while she's waiting. The test ultimately comes back negative, but she wants to know if she can get the Canada Recovery Sickness benefits. So what questions would you ask Sally? How much work did she miss? Good question. Does she have paid sick leave? Yeah, another good question. How recent was the COVID test? Might be false negative. Yeah. How much does she normally work in a week? Yeah. All very good questions. So was she entitled to other sickness benefits? Yeah, for sure. So Sally says she had qualified for CERB before going back to work. So she had the necessary $5,000 in earnings. She was off work for 2 days. She was able to work from home the rest of the week and got paid for those 3 days. She usually works 5 days a week. So what would you tell Sally about her situation? She doesn't qualify if she's able to work more than 50% of her usual work week. Yeah. So Kevin actually switched up the answer on this one from our draft PowerPoint without telling me, but yes, I think that's the correct answer.
Well, the original one was a question about me getting mad because I got called to go pick up my kid yesterday from school and tried to make a question about myself, but I've gone to some, yeah, I switched them all up.
Yeah, to figure out if she gets paid sick days from her employer. Oh, did I go? Where are we? Here we are. So the last of the three benefits is the Canada Recovery Caregiving Benefit. And so this is for somebody who isn't having symptoms themselves necessarily, but they need to care for either a child under the age of 12 or another family member who needs care because their school or their care isn't available because of COVID-19. The person who requires the care has or might have COVID and basically has to isolate, so they can't do things like go to school or daycare or what have you, or are at risk of serious health complications from COVID-19. So again, the requirement is that you cannot work at least 50% of the usual work week. So this is also a maximum 26-week benefit. Two people in the same household can split. So they split basically the 26 weeks is an entitlement for the entire household, not for the individual, but two people in the same household can split those 26 weeks, but only one person in each household can get each week. These are paid in 1 week blocks, and you have to reapply for each block that you take. So looking at another example, we have Andre, whose father told him that the home care worker that usually comes to care for him has canceled due to COVID-19. So Andre wants to basically stay home from work to provide some of that care to his dad that he isn't getting because of the home care worker not being available. And he is asking you about what recovery benefits might be available. So what questions would you ask Andre? And again, if you have ideas, go ahead and drop them in the chat box. So we have, are you unable to work at least 50% of the scheduled work week? Yep. How long will dad be without his usual work or replacement? Yeah. Is anyone else in the home caring for dad and claiming benefits? Is Andre able to work at all? Yeah. These are all important questions. Answers to some of those questions. Yeah, those are good questions. Andre says that he earned more than $5,000 in 2019. He normally works 4-day weeks. He thinks his dad is going to need 2 days of care from him, and then Andre's partner can take over from him. So what would you tell Andre? Tanya says apply.
It's always the right answer, apply. The worst they're going to say is no.
Mm-hmm. Yep. He would qualify for that work, but his partner and him cannot claim for the same week. Yep. They can split the benefit. Andre can't work 50% of his work week and would ask if the partner's also missing work. Yep. Good question. Him and the partner must split the claim, and one can apply each week and take it in turns. Yeah. So I think the switch off between the weeks is probably going to be the way to go. Because my understanding is that you can't have two people apply for the same week block.
Yeah. And it's also, I think, worth noting, Isaac, that I believe it's a bit like EI, that you can't qualify on behalf of other people in your household. So if Andre's partner did not qualify, then only Andre can collect the benefits. To split the benefits between multiple people in a household, all the people wanting to claim benefits have to individually qualify, I believe.
Right.
And there's a question. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, just in terms of things like the earnings requirement, for example.
Yeah. If one partner didn't have the $5,000 and the other did, only one partner could get it. There's a question for this caregiving benefit. Does the school daycare have to be closed, or would parents who choose not to send kids to school daycare due to concerns about COVID-19 and then have to reduce their hours be eligible?
So I think this one you'd want to refer back to those eligibility criteria. So school or care has to not be available either because of COVID-19 or because the individual who requires the care has to isolate because they may have COVID-19 or are at risk of serious health complications. So I think the answer to your question probably depends a little bit. If the school or daycare is closed, yeah, that's pretty solidly going to be a situation that all else being equal, the person could apply for. If they choose not to send the kids to school or daycare due to the concerns about COVID, I think that maybe is going to require a bit more information about, is there a serious health complication that they're at risk of? And I guess, Kevin, my sense is that, we were talking about which claims are more likely to be audited than not. I would guess that this is one where you might want to have some pretty solid medical to back it up.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Yeah, theoretically it's there. It can't just be a personal decision. The rules say there has to be a serious risk of complications from COVID, but it's kind of a deadly disease. I don't know who doesn't have, a risk of health complications from COVID, but I think what they're driving at here, and this is just me guessing, it's still vague. And again, in a lot of these benefit schemes, we have years of decisions to explain a provision. We don't have that here. But I think what they're driving at is you're not going to be able to get it if you just make a personal decision to keep your child home, although there's your kid isn't necessarily at more risk than anybody else. But let's say your kid has an underlying condition that puts them at a much greater risk of complications from COVID, then you make that decision, then you can get the benefit. And I believe the legislation actually says in this case, it has to be on the advice of a nurse or a doctor. So I don't think it goes so far as to say you have to produce a note when you apply, but this is, my advice to clients who want to make this decision would certainly be to contact a nurse or a doctor to get an opinion about whether their kid is at risk of serious health complications from COVID.
Okay. And before we move on, I just want to acknowledge, does Andre and his partner live in the same household? That would be the kind of answer where if this was a law school exam, I would be bumping you up from a B plus to an A minus for the little details. But yes, that's a good one to make sure you clarify. So the recovery benefits, tax back, if you earn over $38,000, you pay back the benefits you receive 50% on the dollar. So for example, if you earn $40,000, you've earned $2,000 over the $38,000 limit. So you pay back 50% of that, which is $1,000, and that's paid back at tax time. And so we're not accountants, so we're not going to pretend that we know how to tell you how to do that. But you should just be aware that there is a possibility of having to pay some of these benefits back. Reviews and appeals. For EI, the usual reconsideration and appeal process applies. The deadline is 30 days. Kevin, is that restricted by the statutory COVID-19 hold on deadlines as well, or is that going to be a freestanding thing?
Oh, goodness. I'm going to get burned again being recorded, so I'm going to couch and dodge. I believe the federal timelines are running again. So to be safe, I would say this. I would not rely on statutory deadlines being frozen. Apply within 30 days. I don't think we want to get into the mess of trying to sort out if your deadline was frozen or not. And it should say the deadline runs 30 days from the date you first find out about the decision. That's another one where you're playing with fire a bit. So what it means is you might have a little longer than the actual 30 days on the letter, but the decision, so I usually, to be safe, go with the date on the actual decision, or the date the date of the decision, because that way you won't be late.
Okay, so stick to your deadlines and don't assume that they've been put on hold, even though there are some deadlines out there that are currently paused. For the recovery benefits, you can request a review. There is a deadline of 30 days. Frankly, this slide is here because Kevin insisted that we have something on reviews and appeals, but right now we don't really have a great sense of what this looks like. I think the legislation just sets out that there will be some sort of review process, and the form of that is going to be basically whatever the minister decides is appropriate. But this one is a little bit up in the air right now, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, totally. And I've asked in no less than 3 meetings now. It's quite clear that no one really has any idea what's going on. And that's not to fault the government per se. They're really focused on the rollout of benefits and the design of the benefits. And fair enough, they're trying to do this pretty quick. And so I think with EI, we know that appeal process exists and it's going to continue to exist. But the recovery benefits, they've kind of just lobbed this right of review into the legislation without a whole lot to say about what happens. So, yeah, to be continued.
And again, all of these benefits have become available fairly recently, so hopefully by the time there are issues of people being denied, we'll have some more details on what the review process looks like. I guess it kind of gives away a little bit our organization, how appeals focused we are, that this was the first question we were thinking of is, what does it look like to try and rectify one of these recovery benefits if it happens that there's a mistake that's made. So impact on income and disability assistance is a question that you may very well see from your clients. And the reason for that is on the Government of Canada's website setting out how you apply. There are a number of little bubbles you tick, and if one of the questions where you have to tick yes or no is, are you receiving provincial or territorial assistance of some kind. And if you click yes, you immediately get a yellow warning sign that tells you to go and contact somebody at Service Canada to figure out how the benefit will potentially affect your provincial income. So you may well get questions from that, just from people trying to go through the website on their own and seeing that and getting concerned. So CERB is exempt, so there isn't going to be an impact on income and disability assistance through CERB. The BC government has indicated that EI will continue to be exempt, and they've also indicated that recovery benefits will be exempt. So that's all kind of to say that we're not anticipating that people's income and disability assistance is going to be affected by the receipt of these benefits. Kevin, did you have anything to add on that point, or is that pretty much?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Unless if Allison is still on, if you have anything to add, or if we got anything wrong, let us know in the chat. Allison says the ministry exemption for EI income is for people on income assistance and disability assistance as of April 2nd, 2020. So exempt if on or before April 1st, 2020. So I think what they're pointing out there is that it may not be exempt for people who apply for assistance after April, but it will be for people who were on before. Is that the moral of the story, Sonia and Allison? And Allison also notes, so Allison says, so for recovery benefits, we don't know what date will apply. But I believe they have indicated that the recovery benefits will be exempt, even if we don't really know the details. And people who got EI in the summer won't have EI exempted if they apply for welfare. So again, like if you're applying, people who are applying for welfare now may not get the exemptions.
There is also, practically speaking, there's a way to punt on answering this question if you are so inclined, which is technically the website tells the prospective applicant to contact their EI or their income assistance office. So you could also just direct them to go do that, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we're working with sort of indications right now, but we're not really solid. So yeah, definitely more to come on this. And if in doubt, they call. So
from the advocate perspective, we think we're anticipating a couple different ways that you may be asked to help, and we are trying to keep in mind that many of you probably are all well aware of these things, and in all likelihood have already been asked to do at least some of these things. But getting clients set up with CRA My Account seems like it's going to be important, and it's going to be a big piece of the application process for these benefits. Helping people apply through that online or the phone process, answering the questions about impacts on income assistance and disability assistance. Again, if you are so inclined, you can probably direct them back to whoever usually answers their questions at the income assistance office. Helping people hunt down ROEs from their employer that we're expecting is going to be potentially important. Helping people ask for review, reconsideration, or appeal. And also we're responding to requests for more info. We're also anticipating there might be some demand for services in those regards. So what we're going to do now is I on my own personal CRA online account went through basically as far as I could on the CRA My Account application process without basically completing the process and making a declaration of a bunch of things that obviously aren't true. So we're just going to show you what this process is sort of going to look like, just so you have a sense of what it is your clients are going to be seeing, and just to sort of give you a sense of what the process really kind of is going to look like for them. I actually only did this for the regular recovery benefit. So there's obviously the 3 different benefits. So 2 of them, unfortunately, we don't have slides to look at for those. But if you have your own CRA My Account, you can actually go and do this. Obviously, you want to be very careful not to actually submit the application, because it requires you to make a bunch of declarations that, if you're here in this seminar, we're hoping are not true for you. So just keep that in mind. But there seems to be a little bit of latitude to go in and kind of poke around without actually putting in the application inadvertently. So this is the overview page here. We have a question. If others who are assisting people with setting up CRA accounts, asking if they're finding they're being locked out or if the site is crashing. So if you're also here in the seminar and you can report similar issues, please do so. I don't know of any of those types of issues firsthand, because I haven't actually walked anybody else through this process. But I would hope that if there are, if people are having issues setting up CRA accounts, that gets rectified fairly soon. And it's possible that their system is seeing a big influx of people setting up these accounts now because of the importance of them to access these benefits. So hopefully tech support at the Government of Canada is looking at this and is going to sort it out fairly soon. But so what we have here is basically part of what you see when you just sign into your CRA My Account. My name and I think some other information, my address or something like that is there. The last tax return that I filed would be in there. So if you want to apply for the Canada Recovery Benefits, it's this link here. Incidentally, if you're helping somebody apply for that last period of CERB, the link to do that is also on this same page. So Ryan adds, he's also having problems as well. The CRA accountants are asking for a line of the 2019 return to verify they have the tax return in front of them and the data doesn't match. That's another thing that you'll probably see quite a bit in applying for these benefits, is that they do encourage you to file a 2019 tax return. So that's another potential issue. So assuming if you were to click on this link here, you then come to this next page. And so you'll see here that basically there's 3 options that correspond with the 3 benefits that are available to you. So unable to work because child under 12 or family member requires supervising care and is unable to attend their school or regular care facility. You're unable to work because you are sick, must self-isolate or quarantine, or you lost some or all of your employment for a reason not listed above, and you're not eligible for employment insurance. So you click one of those and click next. We're going to assume that we're clicking the bottom bubble here, and that's just going to show the next screens that come up when one does that. So somebody was asking me about the declaration for these benefits at one point, and this is actually what it looks like. So you'll see select all the eligibility criteria that apply to you for the 2-week period for which you're applying. You're resident and present in Canada. You are at least 15 years of age on the first day of the period. You have a valid social insurance number, et cetera, et cetera. You will notice that actually you have to tick every single one of these boxes because these are the entirety of the criteria for the benefit. So this is the point in time where your client is sort of making their declaration that they're eligible. There's also at the bottom of the page, you have to indicate that you've either stopped working entirely or you've had a reduction of at least 50% in your employment income or self-employment income. And so once you get through this and check all the boxes, I think this is the bottom part of the same page. You select the period that you're applying for at the bottom here. And then once you've got all that filled out, if you click the next button here, it will then take you to a page where it basically says something along the lines of you are certifying that the information that you're providing here is complete and accurate. And so that's kind of, from what I can tell, looks like the point of no return. So I didn't go past that screen. But it seems to be that that's basically all that needs to happen with the online application process. Potentially, if your client is interested in setting up direct deposit, that I think happens in a different part of the CRA online account. But this is the basics. These are the basic steps of getting through the application process. Oh no, sorry, I did take a screenshot. So this is the page that you get to at the very end. So this is, you can see there's the sort of certification statement, and then you certify that the information is true and correct, and you click the little box at the bottom, and you go on to a screen that I haven't seen because I haven't gone past this point. So that's basically everything that we had to present to you all today, and we're coming up pretty close to the end of our time, but it looks like we've got a little bit of time for questions.
Yeah, so if anybody, we answered as many questions as we could along the way, but if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask, happy to stay on, and you can throw them in the Q&A. And I heard someone say that payback happened if income was over $38,000 for 2019 or 2020, but that CRA screen just says 2020, which is correct. That's a good question. My understanding is it was 2019 or 2020.
I think I've got the screen here, Kevin, and it seems like, so my apologies, when I put the slides together, it actually cut off a little bit of the screen on the right side, as you'll see, but it looks like this is in the context of filing one's 2020 income tax return. So I would guess that if there's an overpayment in 2019, maybe you would have to file it on your 2019 documentation. It's a good question.
Good question. We'll take that away. I had understood it was either year, but we'll double check that for sure.
So I think that's about it. There are no more questions.
Well, thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Isaac. That was such a wonderful presentation. Thank you for sharing such a wealth of knowledge with all the participants. And thank you to all the participants. There will be a survey sent to you by Zoom. Please fill out that survey. Your feedback really helps us to arrange our trainings for the following year. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.